In 2025, the gulf between what's being built and what people can actually afford has never been wider. New housing data shows that luxury units make up nearly 80% of all new construction, while affordable housing starts have stalled at just 150,000 units a year. This is happening even as the country faces a shortage of more than 4.5 million homes, pushing rents higher across the board and putting basic living out of reach for many. The impact is clear in the numbers. 40% of new luxury apartments are vacant 6 months after completion, yet 60% of renters now spend over half their income just to keep a roof over their heads. The economics behind this imbalance explain why the crisis keeps deepening. The 2025 luxury construction boom. Across the country, the construction landscape in 2025 is defined by a surge in luxury housing. According to the latest NAB survey, high-end units now account for about 65% of all new residential construction, a dramatic increase from just a few years ago. In 2024 alone, developers completed 1.2 million luxury rental units, a figure that dwarfs the output of affordable housing, which has stalled at roughly 150,000 units per year since 2020. This disparity stands out even more when you consider that the cost of construction materials has stabilized since the pandemic. The National Builders Organization reports that lumber prices have dropped significantly since their 2021 peak, and concrete costs have remained steady since 2023. The shift toward luxury isn't about materials or supply chains anymore. It's about where developers can maximize returns. This focus on high-end properties has created a backlog of empty units at the top of the market. CoStar Group data from early 2024 shows that luxury apartment vacancies have risen sharply in major metros like Austin and Miami. In Austin, for example, more than half of the new luxury units built since 2023 remain unleased, the highest vacancy rate in the country. Yet, construction continues at a rapid pace, with developers breaking ground on dozens of new high-end towers. Meanwhile, 60% of American renters now spend over half their income on housing, according to the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies. The mismatch is clear. Most new homes are built for a small, affluent segment, while the majority struggle to afford basic shelter. Regional differences make the imbalance even more apparent. In Miami, luxury developments make up 91% of new construction, even though the city faces a shortage of nearly 50,000 affordable rental units. Phoenix follows a similar pattern, with luxury projects accounting for 84% of new builds despite having one of the nation's highest rent burden rates. These construction trends are disconnected from local needs, as the vast majority of new supply targets a market segment that's already overserved. The process of building luxury housing adds further complications. High-rise luxury towers require more time and resources to complete compared to simpler mid-rise or affordable projects, largely due to elaborate amenities and complex financing arrangements. This means developers spend more time and money on each unit, but the result is not more housing for those who need it most. Instead, the focus on high-end finishes and amenities, like rooftop pools, concierge services, and premium appliances, diverts resources away from efficient, large-scale, affordable construction. The financing structure behind these projects also shapes what gets built. Banks and lenders view luxury developments as safer bets, often offering construction loans at lower interest rates than those available for affordable housing. This dynamic creates a cycle where developers are pushed to pursue luxury projects, reinforcing the trend and making it even harder to shift focus toward affordable units. In addition, the labor force has adapted to this demand, with many new construction jobs specializing in high-end finishes rather than the skills needed for efficient, cost-effective building. Material allocation reflects these priorities as well. Luxury projects consume the majority of high-end appliances and fixtures produced each year, leaving affordable housing developers to compete for what's left. Manufacturers like Sub-Zero now report selling more premium refrigerators to apartment developers than to individual homeowners, a sign of just how much the market has shifted. The concentration of luxury construction in a handful of metro areas further deepens regional divides. Just 15 cities account for nearly 70% of all high-end housing starts, while smaller cities and rural areas see little new inventory of any kind. Zoning policies reinforce this pattern, with cities like Los Angeles reserving most of their high-density development for luxury corridors, while maintaining restrictive limits elsewhere. The effects extend beyond the housing market. Cities with the highest rates of luxury construction are also seeing the fastest increases in homelessness, according to recent HUD data. This is not just a matter of misplaced priorities. It's a system that rewards prestige and profit over meeting the basic needs of the population. All of these factors point to a construction boom that is out of sync with what most Americans actually need. The reasons for this skewed focus are rooted in the financial logic that guides every development decision. Why developers won't build affordable? Developers gravitate toward luxury construction for one main reason. It's simply more profitable. According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, profit margins on luxury apartments consistently outpace those on affordable units by a factor of at least 2 to 1, even though the underlying construction costs are nearly identical. The difference comes down to rents. Luxury units command $3,200 a month, while affordable units average around $900. For developers and their investors, these higher returns make luxury projects the obvious choice, regardless of the broader demand for affordable homes. Policy frameworks often reinforce this preference. In most cities, zoning rules and incentives are structured in ways that make luxury development more attractive. Take Minneapolis as an example. Their formula allows developers to build up to 45% more units if they include a certain percentage of affordable housing. But in many other cities, density bonuses and building rights are more often tied to luxury amenities than affordability. This means that, in practice, developers gain extra square footage for adding rooftop pools or gyms, while affordable projects face more restrictions and fewer incentives. Tax policy adds another layer of complexity. New home construction faces an average tariff of $10,900 per unit, according to Investopedia, which developers often offset by building high-rent properties. While affordable projects can access programs like the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, these are limited in scope, highly competitive, and require navigating complex application processes. In contrast, market rate and luxury projects benefit from a range of deductions and credits that, while not exclusive, are easier to access and can significantly reduce effective tax burdens. The result is a system where it's far more straightforward and lucrative to build at the top of the market. Financing is another major hurdle for affordable housing. NAB Builder surveys show that banks and lenders typically offer more lenient terms for market rate and luxury projects. For example, luxury developments often need to pre-lease only 40% of their units before securing construction loans, while affordable projects must secure commitments for 70% or more. This reflects a perception that luxury tenants are more reliable, even though luxury buildings often take longer to fill. Additionally, luxury project loans frequently allow developers to delay principal payments until after lease-up, while affordable housing loans require immediate amortization, putting extra pressure on cash flow from day one. Soft costs, such as permitting delays, legal fees, and impact assessments, can consume up to a third of a project's budget, regardless of whether it's luxury or affordable. These expenses are unavoidable, but luxury's higher margins make them easier to absorb. When cities streamline approval processes, as Minneapolis did, affordable housing construction rises sharply, not because materials are cheaper, but because developers can better manage these overheads. Land acquisition further tips the scales toward luxury. When developers compete for urban sites, the projected income from luxury rents allows them to bid higher and outmaneuver affordable housing proposals. Once a luxury project sets a new price benchmark for a neighborhood, subsequent land deals become even more expensive, crowding out affordable options and making it harder to reverse the trend. Investor behavior reinforces these patterns. Most large developments rely on capital from real estate investment trusts, which segment their portfolios by expected returns. Luxury apartments are categorized as growth assets, promising double-digit returns, while affordable housing is seen as a stable, low-yield investment. This segmentation ensures that capital continues to flow toward high-end projects, even as affordable housing needs go unmet. Other operational factors, like insurance and labor, add to the imbalance. Luxury buildings typically secure lower insurance premiums, based on assumptions about tenant profiles, while affordable projects face higher rates tied to location and income levels. Labor costs also skew higher for luxury construction, as specialized tradespeople command premium wages for installing high-end finishes, leaving fewer resources for affordable projects. Material suppliers prioritize luxury orders as well, allocating the majority of premium appliances and fixtures to high-rent developments. This creates delays in hire. Costs for affordable builders, who may wait months for standard models or pay inflated prices on secondary markets. These overlapping incentives and barriers explain why developers rarely choose to build affordable housing, even in the face of overwhelming demand. The system is structured so that the safest and most profitable path leads to more luxury units. As a result, even when luxury buildings start to see rising vacancies, developers and property managers remain focused on protecting their returns, setting the stage for a new set of financial strategies that shape the rental market. The Vacancy Paradox. The vacancy paradox is one of the most persistent features of today's luxury housing market. Rather than lowering rents to fill empty units, property managers often keep prices high and accept significant vacancies. The reason lies in how these buildings are valued. Investors and lenders use the capitalization rate, net operating income divided by purchase price, to determine a property's worth. For example, a $10 million building generating $500,000 in annual rent would have a 5% cap rate. But if the building sets asking rents high enough to suggest it could collect $600,000, on paper its value rises to $12 million, even if many units remain empty. This approach rewards owners for maintaining elevated prices, not for maximizing occupancy. Short-term rent concessions are another tool that helps preserve this illusion. Instead of reducing the official rent, property managers offer incentives like 2 months free on a year-long lease. This keeps the headline rent high for valuation purposes, while temporarily attracting tenants. According to CoStar data, these strategies increased occupancy rates by 17% in early 2025, but once the concessions expired, vacancy rates quickly climbed again. The practice allows developers to avoid permanent price drops, which would lower the building's appraised value and potentially reduce access to financing. The effects extend beyond new buildings. Older apartment complexes in the same neighborhoods often follow suit, keeping their own rents high to avoid appearing less valuable by comparison. JLL research found that in areas with a large share of luxury development, average rents for older properties rise by over 20% due to this anchoring effect. As a result, the entire rental market drifts away from what most residents can afford. The structure of commercial real estate finance amplifies the vacancy paradox. Many luxury buildings are financed through mortgage-backed securities that rely on projected, not actual, rental income. If landlords lower rents to fill units, they risk violating loan covenants or hurting the refinancing prospects for other properties in the same portfolio. This creates a powerful incentive to keep asking rents high, even as vacancies mount. The numbers illustrate just how much is at stake. In Atlanta's Buckhead district, more than 2,000 luxury apartments sat empty in the second quarter of 2025, while the city's overall vacancy rate for all housing was just 3.4%. These unused units could have housed thousands of people, but instead remained locked up to protect paper valuations. Institutional landlords add another layer of complexity. Large firms use pricing algorithms that benchmark rents against other high-end markets, sometimes ignoring local income levels entirely. A luxury tower in Phoenix, for example, might set rents based on Manhattan prices simply because the software finds similar building features. This disconnect can lead to persistent vacancies and a rental market that serves only a narrow segment. Tax strategies also play a role. Some owners keep a portion of their units vacant to generate paper losses, which can offset income from other properties and reduce their overall tax burden. In these cases, the financial benefit of empty apartments can outweigh the revenue from additional tenants. These practices aren't limited to major cities. In places like Nashville, investor reports claim high lease rates for new luxury buildings, but utility records show that actual occupancy is often much lower. Without requirements for independent audits, the gap between reported and real occupancy can persist for years. For tenants, the vacancy paradox means higher costs. Those who do rent in luxury buildings absorb the expenses of empty units through higher fees for amenities, security, and maintenance. The result is a rental market where affordability declines, vacancies persist, and supply fails to meet genuine demand. While these financial mechanisms keep the luxury market afloat on paper, They mask deeper issues that aren't visible in glossy brochures or online listings. The next problem emerges only after the first tenants move in. Construction quality crisis. Construction quality in new luxury buildings has become a growing concern in recent years, with issues surfacing well before the structures reach even a decade old. Industry reports from NAB and other housing organizations point to a persistent pattern. About 30% of newly completed luxury buildings face major post-completion problems, ranging from water intrusion to mechanical failures. These aren't isolated incidents. They reflect a broader trend where cost-saving measures and an emphasis on visible finishes take priority over structural soundness. Developers have discovered that focusing on high-end aesthetics, like marble countertops and custom lighting, allows them to command premium rents, even while using builder-grade materials behind the walls. For example, a unit may feature imported tile and designer fixtures, but rely on single-pane windows and minimal insulation. The result is a property that looks impressive during a tour, but quickly develops issues once tenants settle in. One Las Vegas project reportedly saved millions by using hollow-core interior doors throughout, while marketing luxury kitchens and spa bathrooms. Mechanical systems are another frequent source of problems. Many luxury buildings install HVAC equipment that's undersized for the building's actual needs, leading to uneven temperatures and frequent breakdowns. Residents in newer towers have reported that upper floors can be several degrees warmer than lower ones during peak summer months, a problem traced back to cost-cutting on climate control systems. Plumbing and electrical systems are often stretched to their limits as well, with leaks and outages emerging within the first few years of operation. Building exteriors are not immune to shortcuts. Developers often choose elaborate stone or metal facades for their visual appeal, but use the cheapest possible waterproofing membranes underneath. When these membranes fail, which can happen soon after the warranty period ends, water intrusion leads to mold, damaged interiors, and expensive repairs. In Miami, one high-rise reported water damage in nearly half its units after the first major hurricane, with investigations revealing widespread skipping of critical waterproofing steps. Even ultra-luxury projects like 432 Park in New York have faced multi-million-dollar lawsuits over structural defects and persistent maintenance issues. Soundproofing is a common area for cost-cutting as well. While standard practice calls for acoustic insulation between units, many new luxury buildings skip these steps to save on both time and labor. Tenant complaints about noise from neighboring apartments have become routine, with a recent PJM survey highlighting soundproofing failures as a top issue in new high-end construction. The savings benefit developers in the short term, but create ongoing frustration for residents. The consequences of these construction choices are significant. Engineers now predict that many luxury buildings completed in the past 5 years will require major system replacements or renovations within a decade, far sooner than the traditional 15 to 20-year life cycle. This means entire buildings may need to be vacated for repairs, temporarily removing hundreds of units from the housing market at a time when vacancies are already a concern. The cycle of premature repairs and renovations undermines the long-term value of these properties and leads to instability in the broader housing market. Warranty protections offer little reassurance. Most new construction comes with only 1 year of coverage for workmanship defects. By the time serious problems emerge, the original development companies have often dissolved, leaving homeowners associations or future owners responsible for costly repairs. The system incentivizes rapid turnover and minimal accountability, with developers moving on to new projects before the consequences of their cost-cutting are fully realized. What's left is a landscape of buildings that appear luxurious, but struggle to meet basic standards of durability and comfort. As these problems become more widespread, the underlying flaws in the current approach to luxury construction become harder to ignore. This shift in priorities doesn't just affect the quality of the buildings themselves. It also shapes who can actually live in them, and what kinds of homes are available for those who need more than just a studio or one bedroom. The disappearing middle-class unit. In recent years, the housing market's focus has narrowed to smaller, high-end units, leaving middle-class families with fewer options than ever. The majority of new apartments are now one-bedrooms or efficiencies. According to the NAB, about 77% of new multifamily units fall into this category, a sharp contrast to the 35% share of three-bedroom units seen as recently as 2010. Today, only 12% of new apartments are built with 3 or more bedrooms, making it increasingly difficult for families to find adequate space. This shift has real consequences for those who need more than just a small place to sleep. The average rent for a 3-bedroom luxury apartment now stands at $5,200 a month, a figure that's out of reach for most households. In many major cities, these rents exceed the median household income, forcing families to either stretch their budgets to unsustainable levels or look far outside the city for something affordable. In places like Los Angeles and Miami, 3-bedroom rents can climb even higher, pushing families to spend well over half their income on housing or endure long commutes from distant suburbs. The shortage of larger units is not just an inconvenience, it's a structural problem that shapes the way people live. For every new 3-bedroom apartment built, developers add several times as many studios and 1-bedrooms. The result is a market that doesn't match the needs of the population. According to the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, more than 22 million renter households are now considered cost-burdened, spending over 30% of their income on housing. This pressure is especially acute for families, who often end up doubling up in smaller units or living in overcrowded conditions. Developers often point to market demand as the reason for building so many small units, but the data suggests otherwise. In cities where 3-bedroom apartments are available, they tend to lease faster than studios, according to CoStar's leasing data. Families actively seek out these larger spaces, but the supply simply isn't there. The real driver is profit. Dividing a building into many small units generates more rental income per square foot than creating family-sized apartments, even though the construction costs are similar. Zoning and city incentives further reinforce this trend. Many municipalities offer density bonuses for maximizing the number of units on a given lot, which naturally pushes developers towards small apartments. A high-rise with hundreds of studios is more profitable and easier to finance than a building with fewer, larger homes. Lenders also evaluate projects based on projected rental income per square foot, rewarding layouts that maximize the count of high-rent, compact units. The result is a housing system that leaves middle-income families squeezed from both sides. Those earning too much to qualify for subsidized housing, but not enough to afford market-rate 3-bedrooms, find themselves with limited choices. Many end up in aging, unrenovated apartments that come with their own set of problems, or they move further away from jobs and schools in search of something affordable. Demographic changes are adding to the strain. As millennials reach their peak family-forming years, the demand for larger units is only increasing, yet the market continues to deliver mostly studios and 1-bedrooms. Even when cities introduce policies requiring a minimum number of family-sized units, developers often place these apartments in less desirable parts of the building, making them less attractive to potential renters. The shortage of middle-class, family-friendly apartments has ripple effects throughout the housing market. Families who can't find suitable rentals compete for 2-bedroom units, pushing up rents and crowding out smaller households. This displacement contributes to the broader crisis of affordability and overcrowding, while new luxury studios often remain vacant. As the housing market continues to prioritize small, high-rent units over livable family homes, the disconnect between what's being built and what people actually need grows wider. This mismatch isn't just the result of market forces or changing tastes. It's increasingly shaped by decisions made far from the neighborhoods. Institutional investors are now a major force behind the construction of new luxury apartments. In 2025, about 30% of new multifamily developments are financed by institutional capital, according to the latest Redfin and NAB data. This shift is further reflected in ownership trends. A 2024 Deloitte report found that 40% of all U.S. rental apartments are now held by private equity firms, pension funds, and real estate investment trusts. These investors approach housing as a financial asset first, with their priorities shaping what gets built and how buildings are designed. When developers target institutional buyers, every stage of the construction process changes. Architects and planners are instructed to focus on features that boost appraised value and facilitate easy portfolio management, rather than on what makes apartments comfortable or practical for residents. The result is a proliferation of standardized units, often small studios or 1-bedrooms, with layouts optimized for price per square foot. Unique floor plans or custom features are avoided, since standardized designs are easier to market and trade between investors. In cities like Nashville and Dallas, entire towers of nearly identical units have become the norm, with developers using proven templates that appeal to institutional risk models. This standardization produces a market where apartments are essentially interchangeable commodities. Institutional investors want predictable returns, so they pressure developers to stick with unit mixes and amenities that have already performed well in other cities. The focus is on features that appraise well, like high-end countertops and walk-in closets, rather than those that improve daily life for tenants. Developer surveys indicate that nearly 80% of new projects now prioritize maximizing price per square foot, even if it means sacrificing livability. The influence of institutional ownership reaches beyond design. Lease terms are often crafted to benefit the investor's financial flexibility. Some buildings, for example, include lease clauses that allow owners to convert leases to month after the first year, making it easier to vacate units quickly if the property is to be sold. Renewal options and tenant protections are limited, as occupancy is treated as a variable in financial models rather than a long-term commitment to residents. Maintenance and repair practices are also shaped by investor incentives. Because many institutional owners plan to hold properties for only 5 to 7 years before selling, there's a strong incentive to keep operating costs low and defer non-essential repairs. Reports from industry analysts show that maintenance spending in investor-owned buildings is significantly lower than in traditionally owned properties, not because the buildings are better constructed, but because repairs are often postponed to maximize short-term returns. The financial logic of institutional investing also drives up land and construction costs. When a large investor pays a premium for a new tower, it sets a new benchmark for appraisals and land prices in the area. This feedback loop encourages developers to pursue ever higher valuations, regardless of whether the local market can support the resulting rents. Construction costs have outpaced material price increases, with much of the difference attributed to inflated land values driven by institutional acquisitions. Reporting practices further distort the market. SEC guidelines require REITs and similar entities to report market rents, theoretical maximums, rather than actual lease rates. This allows property owners to present higher expected incomes to investors and lenders, even if many units stand empty or are leased at lower rates. In practice, this means that new projects are justified and financed based on inflated assumptions, fueling another round of luxury construction. The unit mix in these investor-driven projects reflects their financial purpose. Buildings skew heavily towards studios and one-bedrooms, which are easier to trade and manage within large portfolios. In some recent developments, studios make up more than 80% of the units, a configuration that would rarely be chosen if the goal were to house families or long-term residents. This entire system creates a parallel housing market, one where the primary customer is the institutional investor, not the person who actually lives in the apartment. Vacancy rates remain higher in these buildings, but profitability is preserved through financial engineering and tax strategies. The focus on asset value over livability means that many new units remain out of reach for those who need housing most. As these practices become more common, developers are also exploring other ways to maximize returns on new construction, often by blurring the lines between traditional apartments and other, more profitable uses. The short-term rental factor. Short-term rentals have become a defining feature of the new luxury housing market. Developers increasingly design apartment buildings with the specific intent of catering to the short-term rental market, especially in cities where tourism drives high demand. Instead of focusing on long-term residents, many new projects incorporate features like keyless entry systems, industrial laundry rooms, and flexible layouts that are better suited for rotating guests than permanent tenants. According to recent research from the National Association of Realtors, cities across the country are seeing a noticeable uptick in luxury condos and apartments being converted to short-term rentals, particularly in neighborhoods close to business districts and entertainment hubs. This shift is not just a response to consumer preferences, but a strategic financial decision. Luxury units can command higher nightly rates on platforms like Airbnb and VRBO, often generating more revenue in a month than a traditional lease would bring in. While the costs associated with frequent turnover and platform fees are higher, the potential for increased income makes the short-term rental model attractive to developers and investors alike. In tourist-heavy markets like Miami, Las Vegas, and Orlando, this approach has become so widespread that entire buildings are marketed to institutional buyers as STR-ready, with amenities and management structures designed to support a steady flow of short-term guests. The consequences for local housing markets are significant. Every unit dedicated to short-term rental is one less home available for long-term residents, further tightening the already limited supply of affordable housing. Even though these buildings are technically classified as residential, their actual use as de facto hotels distorts housing inventory statistics and masks the true extent of the shortage. As noted in recent background research, this strategy reduces the number of available homes and drives up rents for everyone else, especially in cities where workforce housing is already scarce. Zoning laws have not kept pace with this trend. Most cities still draw a clear line between residential and commercial uses on paper, but few have regulations that address the hybrid nature of these new developments. Developers take advantage of this legal gray area by obtaining residential permits and then partnering with property management companies that specialize in short-term rentals. As a result, buildings that appear in official records as apartments may, in practice, operate almost entirely as hotels. In some cases, developers even dedicate entire floors to furnished units with hotel-style services, further blurring the distinction between housing and hospitality. Municipal governments face real challenges in tracking and regulating these conversions. Many booking platforms resist sharing detailed data with city officials, making it difficult to assess how much of the local housing stock has shifted to short-term use. While some cities have attempted to cap the number of STRs or require minimum lease terms, developers often find ways to work around these rules, such as offering 30-day minimum stays that still exclude most long-term residents. The financial incentives driving this trend extend all the way back to project financing. Lenders increasingly offer favorable terms to developments that can demonstrate strong potential for short-term rental income. This has led to a feedback loop where more new construction is designed with the flexibility to serve either tourists or residents, depending on which is more profitable at any given time. For neighborhoods, the impact is clear. Rents for traditional apartments tend to rise in areas with high concentrations of short-term rentals, and the constant turnover of guests can strain building maintenance and disrupt community stability. Residents often face increased noise, security concerns, and a sense of impermanence as their buildings fill with visitors rather than neighbors. The growing prevalence of short-term rental conversions is shaping not only what gets built, but also who can afford to live in the city. As developers and investors chase higher returns from temporary guests, fewer units remain available for people who need stable, long-term housing. The result is a market that prioritizes flexibility and profit over permanence and affordability. This evolution in building use is also influencing the broader construction industry. The demand for short-term rental, friendly amenities, and rapid turnover services is changing the types of skills and labor needed on job sites, further complicating efforts to address the shortage of affordable homes. Construction labor shortages. Labor shortages are now one of the most significant obstacles to building affordable housing, and the luxury construction boom is a major driver behind this imbalance. The demand for skilled tradespeople on high-end projects has pushed wages up across the industry. According to NAB, skilled trade wages have increased by about 15% since 2021, with some roles seeing even sharper gains on luxury sites. Affordable housing developers find themselves unable to compete for experienced workers, as high-end projects consistently offer better pay and steadier work. This wage inflation is not just a matter of higher hourly rates. The concentration of construction spending in the luxury sector, now accounting for roughly 85% of residential construction dollars, means that most available jobs are tied to high-margin projects. As a result, Workers are incentivized to specialize in premium finishes and complex installations, rather than the efficient, cost-effective techniques needed for affordable housing. Electricians become experts in smart home systems and advanced lighting, while plumbers focus on luxury fixtures that rarely appear in more modest projects. Over time, this creates a workforce that is less equipped to build the types of homes most people actually need. The supply of skilled labor remains tight despite modest overall growth in construction employment. U.S. Census data shows a 2.2% year-over-year increase in sector employment as of January, but NAB forecasts a plateau in residential hiring as the market absorbs the current glut of luxury units. This means there are not enough new workers entering the trades to offset retirements or to staff both luxury and affordable projects at scale. The shortage affects all housing types, but the impact is most acute for affordable developers who already operate on thin margins. Skill misalignment compounds the problem. With most training and apprenticeship programs now geared toward high-end construction, the next generation of workers is learning how to install imported tile and custom cabinetry, not how to rapidly frame and finish cost-effective housing. Trade schools and unions have shifted their curricula to meet the demands of the luxury market, scaling back on foundational courses in basic carpentry, drywall, and modular assembly. This shift leaves affordable housing projects struggling to find crews with the right experience, even when funding is available. The ripple effects extend to project timelines and costs. Contractors bidding on affordable developments often submit proposals that are 40% to 50% over budget, reflecting the premium they could earn on luxury jobs. Some affordable projects stall or are canceled altogether because developers cannot secure enough skilled workers at a price that keeps the project viable. Others move forward with less experienced labor, which can lead to quality issues and further stigmatize affordable housing as substandard. Material handling and site logistics have also adapted to the luxury market's demands. High-end projects require just-in-time delivery of expensive, custom materials, and labor crews are trained to manage these complexities. Affordable housing, by contrast, benefits from standardized materials delivered in bulk, but the workforce is less familiar with these efficient practices. The result is a system where labor productivity for affordable projects lags behind potential, simply because the available skills are mismatched to the task. Safety standards and site protocols, developed for the unique challenges of luxury construction, have become the industry norm. While important for worker protection, these practices can drive up labor hours and costs on simpler projects that do not require such extensive precautions. This further erodes the cost advantage affordable housing once held. All of these factors contribute to a construction labor market that now operates primarily in service of luxury development. The existing workforce is present, but its training, pay expectations, and daily experience are shaped by the demands of high-end projects. For affordable housing, this means competing for a shrinking pool of qualified workers, often at unsustainable prices. While labor shortages and skill gaps remain front and center, developers often point to another culprit when explaining why affordable housing is so difficult to deliver. They argue that material costs are the real barrier, but a closer look at the numbers tells a different story. Material cost myths. Arguments about high material costs often dominate discussions around affordable housing, but the actual financial breakdown of most projects tells a different story. When developers choose luxury over affordability, the price of materials is rarely the deciding factor. The added expense of premium finishes, like quartz countertops or designer appliances, represents a small fraction of the total cost for a new unit. According to industry research, these upgrades are quickly offset by the higher rents luxury units command, with the initial investment recouped in just a few months. This dynamic explains why developers continue to pursue luxury projects, regardless of fluctuations in material prices. What really drives up the cost of new housing are soft costs, permitting delays, legal fees, financing charges, and land acquisition. These expenses account for between a quarter and a third of a typical project's budget, whether the building is high-end or affordable. Unlike materials, soft costs are largely fixed and unavoidable. A 6-month delay in the approval process can add hundreds of thousands of dollars in carrying costs, eating away at already slim margins. Luxury developers can absorb these expenses thanks to higher eventual rents, but affordable projects often become financially impossible under the same conditions. Permitting inefficiencies are a major culprit. The average multifamily project spends up to 2 years in the approval pipeline before a single shovel hits the ground. Throughout this period, developers pay interest on loans, architectural fees, and other overheads without generating any income. The longer the wait, the greater the financial risk. Some cities have recognized this problem and responded by streamlining their permitting processes. Minneapolis, for example, saw a 40% jump in affordable housing starts after reducing approval times to 6 months, all without lowering material costs. This outcome makes it clear that regulatory efficiency, not cheaper supplies, is the key to unlocking more affordable construction. Financing structures compound the problem. Luxury projects typically benefit from interest-only construction loans, allowing developers to delay principal payments until the building is leased and generating cash flow. Affordable housing loans, on the other hand, often require immediate principal payments, putting extra pressure on already tight budgets. The structure of these loans can make or break a project, sometimes matching more than the actual costs of construction materials. Land costs are another area where misconceptions persist. While prime locations are more expensive, the real challenge for affordable developers isn't the price of land itself, but the difficulty in making the numbers work under current regulatory and financing conditions. Parcels suitable for affordable housing often remain vacant for years, not because they're unaffordable, but because developers can't navigate the approval process or secure favorable loan terms. Meanwhile, luxury projects move forward on adjacent lots, reinforcing the cycle of high-end construction. Insurance and bonding requirements further tilt the playing field. Affordable housing projects face higher premiums due to perceived risks, regardless of the actual quality of construction. These hidden costs can add 15% to 20% to a project's insurance bill each year, making it even harder for affordable developments to compete. Appraisal methods also play a role. Lenders and investors value buildings based on projected income, not construction costs or actual leases. This means a luxury tower with vacant units can still appraise higher than a fully occupied affordable building, making it easier to secure financing for new luxury projects and perpetuating the cycle. Efforts to address the housing shortage have shown that the solution isn't in cutting material costs, but in reforming the processes that slow down and complicate affordable construction. Cities that have introduced online permitting, pre-approved building plans, or by-right zoning for affordable developments have seen real increases in new housing starts, all without touching the price of concrete or steel. The myth of material costs as the primary barrier persists because it offers a simple explanation for a complex problem, but the evidence points elsewhere. Until the focus shifts to streamlining approvals, improving financing terms, and reducing soft costs, developers will continue to choose luxury projects. Not because materials are too expensive, but because the system makes affordable housing so much harder to build. While these structural barriers keep affordable housing out of reach, another layer of the problem comes from how developers choose to spend the money they do have. The amenities arms race. Developers of luxury housing now devote a growing share of their budgets to amenities, prioritizing features that stand out in marketing materials and investor presentations. This amenities arms race has become a defining trend in new construction, with developers allocating as much as 4 to 6% of total project costs to communal spaces and specialty features, according to the latest consensus forecasts from the American Institute of Architects. The result is a landscape where rooftop pickleball courts, virtual golf simulators, and dog spas are increasingly common, regardless of how often residents actually use them. The motivation behind these amenities is less about meeting real tenant needs and more about supporting higher rent levels and property valuations. Buildings compete on the strength of their feature lists, not on the quality of daily living they provide. For many residents, the appeal of these amenities fades quickly. Surveys from the National Association of Home Builders show that amenity usage tends to decline within the first year, as the novelty wears off and tenants fall back on more practical spaces like laundry rooms and package lockers. Yet, the inclusion of these features persists, because appraisers and investors often reward projects for having them, regardless of how little they contribute to residents' lives. The financial and spatial impact of this trend is significant. Developers often dedicate up to 30% of a building's floor plan to common areas and amenity spaces, shrinking the actual living space available to each resident. In a typical mid-sized luxury development, thousands of square feet are reserved for lounges, fitness studios, and game rooms, areas that could otherwise be used to create additional apartments for families or individuals. The opportunity cost is substantial. The resources funneled into these non-essential features could fund the construction of multiple affordable housing units, as highlighted by recent research from the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. Maintaining these amenities carries its own burden. Ongoing costs for cleaning, utilities, and equipment servicing can run tens of thousands of dollars each month for a single building. These expenses add to the soft costs that already make up a large share of overall project budgets. While luxury developers can absorb these costs through higher rents, the spending rarely translates into increased tenant satisfaction or improved community outcomes. Instead, the cycle of overbuilding amenities continues, driven by a system that rewards spectacle over substance. This focus on amenities also affects construction quality. Resources that could improve the durability, comfort, or energy efficiency of apartments are instead diverted to features with little lasting value. It's not uncommon to see buildings with expensive lobby art installations or climate-controlled wine cellars, while basic soundproofing or insulation is neglected. The pursuit of eye-catching amenities often comes at the expense of the essentials that make a home truly livable. The external impact of amenity-heavy developments extends to city infrastructure as well. High electricity and water demands from luxury features strain local grids and utilities. For example, a single high-rise spa facilities and rooftop pools can use more power and water than dozens of standard apartments, increasing the burden on public resources without expanding access to housing. Investor expectations play a central role in perpetuating this cycle. Real estate investment trusts and institutional buyers have established benchmarks that reward buildings for specific amenity packages, regardless of their actual utility. Properties accrue luxury points for having the latest features, which can boost appraisals and attract capital, even if the spaces remain underused. This system pressures developers to continually escalate their offerings, with little regard for what residents actually want or need. Ultimately, the cost of these amenities is passed on to renters. A portion of every luxury rent check, often several $100s, goes toward maintaining and financing features that most tenants rarely use. Yet, removing these amenities would not necessarily lower rents. The underlying economics of luxury development mean that savings would likely be captured as higher profits rather than passed on to residents. The result is a market where renters subsidize an ever-growing list of luxuries, while practical needs go unmet. Some cities have started to respond by introducing policies that limit excessive amenity spending or require developers to demonstrate actual demand for proposed features. Early evidence suggests that buildings with a more restrained approach to amenities lease just as quickly, if not faster, than those with extravagant offerings. A few institutional investors are also rethinking their strategies, penalizing projects with high amenity costs in their underwriting models. As developers continue to invest in amenities that offer diminishing returns for residents, a deeper misalignment is emerging between what is built and who actually needs housing. This growing disconnect is reflected in the very people luxury developments are designed to attract, and those they leave out, the demographic mismatch. Developers continue to focus on building for a narrow slice of the rental market, even as the needs of the population have shifted. For much of the past decade, new construction has targeted young professionals, especially dual-income households without children, resulting in a glut of studios and one-bedroom units. This approach might have made sense when millennials were entering the workforce, but as that generation ages, the demand for larger, family-oriented housing has only grown. Meanwhile, the fastest-growing group of renters is now retirees, who require accessible, affordable homes rather than luxury amenities or downtown nightlife. The mismatch between what is being built and what people actually need is clear. According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, there is a shortage of 7.1 million homes for extremely low-income renters. At the same time, Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies reports that 22.4 million renter households spend more than 30% of their income on housing, with 12.1 million spending over half. These figures reflect a market that is not only failing to keep up with demand, but also producing the wrong types of units. Family-sized apartments have become rare, and accessible units for older adults are even harder to find. Less than 9% of new construction includes basic accessibility features, despite the rising number of renters over age 60. Millennials, now well into their 30s and 40s, are forming families and seeking homes with more space. Yet, the supply of 2- and 3-bedroom units has not kept pace. Most new developments still prioritize small units with high-end finishes, following outdated assumptions about who the average renter is. As a result, families often face limited choices. Pay a premium for scarce larger units, settle for aging apartments with outdated utilities, or move far from jobs and schools in search of something affordable. The percentage of families spending over 50% of their income on rent has tripled since 2010, particularly among those with children. Retirees face a different set of barriers. The market for accessible, affordable rentals remains undersupplied, even as the number of older renters grows each year. Many new 55-plus communities emphasize luxury amenities and premium pricing rather than practical features like grab bars or step-free access. For seniors living on fixed incomes, these properties are often out of reach, forcing many to remain in older, less suitable apartments. The lack of senior-friendly units outside of subsidized programs leaves a growing segment of the population underserved. Developers and lenders often defend their choices by pointing to profitability and market data from years past. Financing models still assume that young professionals are the primary renters, justifying more small units despite clear evidence to the contrary. These outdated assumptions persist in zoning and permitting, which frequently allow micro-unit developments while making it harder to build family-friendly or accessible housing. The result is a cycle where new luxury towers fill the skyline, but vacancy rates remain high among the very demographic they were meant to attract, while families and seniors struggle to find homes that fit their needs. Some cities are starting to adjust course. Denver has implemented requirements for family-sized units in certain districts, leading to a noticeable increase in 3-bedroom construction. Boston's incentives for senior housing have spurred a rise in accessible units. These targeted interventions acknowledge that relying solely on market forces will not resolve the demographic gap. Investors are also beginning to respond. Some large institutional owners have shifted their underwriting to reflect faster lease-up rates for family and senior-oriented properties, recognizing that the real demand lies outside the traditional luxury market. The failure to align new construction with demographic realities has broader consequences for communities and local economies. When the housing stock doesn't match the needs of residents, it leads to overcrowding, rising costs, and instability for families and older adults alike. This misalignment doesn't just affect renters. It shapes the fiscal health of cities and the sustainability of local services. As the next section will show, these patterns have long-term implications for how the way cities structure their property tax base around luxury development creates a hidden vulnerability in municipal finances. At first, new high-end towers seem like a windfall. They bring in higher property tax assessments, generate immediate revenue, and give city leaders a way to balance budgets without raising rates elsewhere. But this short-term boost comes with long-term obligations that outlast the premium status of these buildings. Each luxury development requires expanded infrastructure, upgrades to water systems, roads, emergency services, and public transit that will serve the building for decades, regardless of who lives there or what rents those units command in the future. The underlying numbers reveal the imbalance. 10 luxury condos valued at $500,000 each might generate less total property tax revenue over their lifespan than 50 smaller, more affordable units valued at $200,000 apiece. Yet the infrastructure and public services needed, police, fire protection, schools, utilities, are not scaled to the number of units, but to the presence of the building itself. This means cities are often left supporting expensive infrastructure for a relatively small number of residents, while missing out on the broader revenue base that comes from more diverse housing stock. As buildings age, the situation becomes more difficult. Luxury apartments are initially assessed at peak market values, reflecting the highest achievable rents. Over time, as these buildings transition to mid-market status and rents fall, their assessed value drops as well. Cities then face shrinking tax revenue, but the costs of maintaining infrastructure and services remain fixed or even rise as maintenance needs increase. A recent study found that luxury apartments lose nearly a quarter of their assessed value in the first decade, just as their need for repairs and city services begins to climb. The result is a growing gap between what cities collect in taxes and what they must spend to keep these neighborhoods functioning. This fiscal trap is visible in cities that have leaned heavily into luxury construction. Places like Miami and Austin have watched early luxury districts generate less tax revenue per square foot over time, even as service demands persist. Meanwhile, the shortage of affordable units remains acute, as documented by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, and the tax base becomes increasingly reliant on a narrow segment of high-value properties. The pressure on city budgets spills over into other areas. When property tax revenue from luxury buildings declines, cities must either cut public services or raise taxes elsewhere. This often leads to workforce shortages, especially in public safety and education. In some metros, municipal workers are priced out of the very neighborhoods they serve, making it harder to attract and retain essential staff. The cost of living near luxury developments continues to climb, while city salaries lag behind, deepening the divide between public needs and available resources. Infrastructure costs tied to luxury construction also drive up utility rates for everyone. High-end buildings with extensive amenities use far more water and electricity per resident than standard apartments, prompting cities to invest in expanded capacity. When usage drops as these buildings age or amenities fall out of use, the sunk costs remain, and the burden is spread across all ratepayers. This pattern has contributed to rising water and utility bills in cities that prioritized luxury development over a balanced housing mix. Transportation investments follow a similar pattern. Developers often lobby for transit extensions, new roads, or streetcar lines to serve their properties. These projects add significant debt to city budgets, with repayment schedules that stretch out for decades. If luxury neighborhoods lose their appeal or shift to mid-market status, cities are left paying for infrastructure that no longer aligns with current demand. Property tax abatements further complicate the equation. Many luxury projects secure temporary tax breaks to incentivize construction, but these abatements expire just as buildings begin to lose value. Cities then face a double hit. Service costs remain high, but tax collections fall short of projections. The timing of these abatements often leaves city budgets exposed at the worst possible moment. Credit agencies and municipal bond markets have begun to factor in these risks. Cities with a high concentration of luxury properties are seeing their credit ratings downgraded, which raises borrowing costs for all future projects. This makes it even harder to invest in affordable housing, schools, or infrastructure upgrades elsewhere in the city. Some municipalities are starting to respond by requiring fiscal impact analyses for new developments, or by tying tax incentives to the inclusion of family-sized or affordable units. These policies aim to ensure that new construction contributes to long-term fiscal health, not just short-term revenue goals. Still, the legacy of past decisions leaves many cities with a structural imbalance that will take years to correct. As cities grapple with the financial consequences of luxury-driven development, the public debate around housing policy is shifting. The visible gap between empty high-end units and unmet housing needs is fueling new pressures on lawmakers and residents alike. The rent control backlash. Public frustration over rising rents and persistent housing shortages has led to a wave of new rent control measures in cities across the country. In 2024, 22 major cities enacted or expanded rent control laws, responding to visible inequality and high vacancy rates in luxury buildings. While these policies are intended to make housing more affordable, they often trigger a set of unintended consequences that reinforce the very problems they aim to solve. Developers, anticipating new regulations, accelerate construction of luxury units before rent caps take effect. Permit data from cities considering rent control frequently show a surge. Luxury housing approvals can spike by more than a third in the months before new rules are implemented. This rush brings even more high-end supply to markets already saturated with unaffordable units, while affordable housing projects remain stalled or unviable. Instead of relieving pressure, these policies inadvertently deepen the imbalance between what is built and what is actually needed. The cycle becomes self-perpetuating. As more luxury units are completed in advance of rent control, the number of vacant high-end apartments climbs. These empty buildings become potent symbols of inequality, fueling further public anger and calls for stricter regulations. Cities like Sacramento have tightened rent control more than once in response to persistent luxury vacancies, but each new round of regulation only encourages another wave of preemptive luxury construction. The result is a feedback loop in which attempts to control rent growth actually produce more of the housing that is least in demand. Developers' financial incentives are clear. Luxury buildings completed before rent control deadlines retain the ability to charge higher rents, while new projects started after regulations are capped at lower rates. This creates a strong motivation to finish high-end projects quickly, compressing construction timelines. Projects that might take 3 years under normal conditions are suddenly completed in 2, as builders race to lock in future revenue. The logic is straightforward. A luxury unit with a $3,000 monthly rent approved before controls is far more valuable than a similar unit capped at $2,200 after regulations pass. The financing environment amplifies these effects. Lenders view rent-controlled markets as higher risk, which drives up interest rates for all projects. Only luxury developments, those with the highest potential rents, can absorb these additional costs. Affordable projects, already operating on thin margins, become even less feasible. This shift in the lending landscape reinforces the trend toward high-end construction and further limits the supply of affordable homes. Investor behavior also adapts to the new reality. Large institutional buyers target luxury buildings completed before rent controls, treating them as stable, inflation-resistant assets. These purchases remove even more units from the pool of potential affordable housing, as investors prioritize returns over occupancy. Meanwhile, middle-income and family housing starts to decline sharply once regulations are in place, leaving a stark divide between luxury and everything else. The quality of new construction often suffers in the rush. Developers strip out amenities and cut corners to maximize short-term profits before rent caps take effect. Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies has documented rising maintenance backlogs and declining building quality in cities with aggressive rent controls, as builders substitute cheaper materials and delay repairs to offset anticipated revenue limits. Renters face higher prices for units that offer less comfort and durability. The volatility created by this cycle extends beyond construction. Cities experience unpredictable swings in tax revenue as pre-control building booms are followed by sharp declines in new development. Labor markets for construction workers become unstable, with hiring surges ahead of regulatory deadlines followed by layoffs and job losses once the rules are in place. These disruptions make it even harder to plan for long-term growth or invest in affordable housing at scale. Some cities have attempted to break the cycle by pairing tenant protections with incentives for affordable construction. Boston, for example, exempts new developments from rent control but requires a share of affordable units in luxury projects. This approach has helped maintain construction rates while gradually increasing the affordable supply. Other cities, however, continue to rely on blanket rent caps, only to see rents rise faster in uncontrolled segments and supply stagnate overall. The backlash against rent control highlights the complexity of housing policy. Well-intentioned regulations can easily collide with financial incentives, producing outcomes that frustrate both renters and policymakers. As long as the system rewards luxury construction and penalizes affordable projects, the cycle of oversupply at the high end and scarcity everywhere else will persist. These pressures are not confined to city centers. The ripple effects of luxury-focused development and regulatory backlash are reshaping the broader housing landscape, pushing more households to seek alternatives outside urban cores. The suburban spiral. The shift in new housing construction toward luxury units in city centers has triggered a profound change in where middle-class families live and work. As developers continue to prioritize studios and one-bedrooms, now making up about 3/4 of all new multifamily starts, families in need of larger, affordable apartments are left with few options close to jobs or schools. According to the National Association of Home Builders, just 12% of new apartments have 3 or more bedrooms, compared to 35% in 2010. This mismatch between what is built and what people actually need forces many families to seek housing farther from urban cores, fueling a pattern of outward migration. The consequences of this shift are visible in both daily routines and broader urban patterns. Displaced by a shortage of suitable units, teachers, healthcare workers, and service employees now face longer commutes from distant suburbs. The environmental impact is clear. Cities with the highest rates of luxury construction have also seen larger increases in vehicle miles traveled, as more households rely on cars to reach work, school, and basic services. This increased reliance on commuting not only negates the green features touted by many new luxury buildings, but also contributes to higher emissions and greater congestion. The irony is that while urban towers advertise energy efficiency and sustainability, their economic impact forces thousands into carbon-intensive suburban lifestyles. School districts reflect the demographic changes set in motion by this housing imbalance. Urban schools near luxury developments report declining enrollment as families relocate, while suburban schools face overcrowding and the need for costly expansions. These shifts impose additional burdens on local governments, which must fund portable classrooms and extend bus routes, further increasing transportation emissions and operational costs. The financial burden on families who move outward is also significant. Many find that the cost of longer commutes, fuel, maintenance, tolls, quickly offsets any savings from lower suburban rents. According to recent data, displaced families spend thousands more each year on transportation, often leaving them in a worse financial position than before. Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies notes that 22.4 million renter households already spend over 30% of their income on housing, and the added costs of suburban living only deepen this strain. Commercial and civic life in urban neighborhoods changes as well. As middle-income households leave, businesses that once served them, grocers, clinics, childcare centers, follow the population outward. Downtown districts become dominated by luxury housing and high-end retail, while everyday amenities dwindle. This hollowing out of urban cores leaves even affluent residents with fewer options for daily needs, sometimes requiring car trips for basic errands. Transit planning has not kept pace with these changes. Investments in downtown streetcars or light rail often focus on serving luxury districts, while bus routes to working-class or suburban areas are reduced or eliminated. The result is a transportation system that reinforces car dependence and suburban expansion, rather than supporting a diverse, connected urban population. The time cost of this new reality is hard to ignore. Workers pushed to the suburbs spend dozens of extra hours each year commuting, time that could otherwise go to family, education, or community involvement. Studies link these longer commutes to higher stress, lower civic engagement, and even increased family instability. Cities are beginning to recognize the long-term risks of this pattern. Some, like Minneapolis and Denver, have adopted policies that require or incentivize the construction of family-sized apartments and preserve affordable units near transit lines. Early results suggest that these measures can slow outward migration and support more balanced growth. But the scale of the challenge remains significant. The financial sector is also watching closely. Mortgage lenders report higher default rates among suburban buyers who were once urban renters, citing the hidden costs of longer commutes and greater reliance on cars. Municipal budgets feel the strain as well, with cities forced to maintain infrastructure in sprawling suburbs while underused urban systems deteriorate. Solving the suburban spiral will require more than just building additional units. It demands a deliberate focus on matching new supply to the needs of current and future residents. Policies that encourage a mix of unit sizes and support affordable housing near jobs and transit can help reverse the trend, but progress is slow. Until the underlying incentives change, the the pattern of outward migration and rising costs is likely to continue. These pressures are already setting the stage for new challenges in the housing market. As the focus on luxury development persists and the financial realities of past construction decisions come to bear, the next phase will test the stability of both urban and suburban housing landscapes. The coming refinancing crisis. Many of the luxury apartment buildings that went up during the last construction boom are now facing a financial crossroads. Developers who borrowed heavily at low interest rates between 2021 and 2023 now confront a very different lending environment. Construction loans, which usually last 3 to 5 years, are coming due just as interest rates have doubled. What once cost 3% to service will now require 7% or 8%, dramatically increasing the monthly debt burden on properties that were already struggling to achieve their projected rents. Analysts expect that 15 to 20% of these luxury projects could default on their loans as they attempt to refinance in 2025 and 2026. The problem is straightforward. A developer with a $100 million loan may have paid $3 million a year in interest before, but refinancing at today's rates means facing annual payments of $7 million or more. Meanwhile, many of these buildings are bringing in less income than anticipated. For instance, a Miami tower completed in 2022 was expected to generate $4.8 million a year, but actual collections hover around $3.1 million. The gap between optimistic projections and reality is widespread, with nearly 2 out of every 5 luxury buildings from the boom years falling short of their income targets. This mismatch is not just a matter of poor forecasting. Developers built these towers assuming rents would rise steadily and that refinancing would be easy. But the flood of new luxury supply, combined with softening demand and higher interest rates, has left many projects exposed. In places like Phoenix and Austin, where the pace of luxury construction was fastest, the difference between projected and actual rents can be hundreds of dollars per month. Even buildings with relatively high occupancy rates are finding that their income simply can't keep up with their new debt obligations. When defaults occur, the fallout will ripple through the market. Distressed properties will not be converted to affordable housing. The operating costs of luxury buildings, high-end finishes, premium amenities, and expensive maintenance make them too costly to run at lower rent levels. A lobby finished in imported marble, or a building with smart elevators and climate-controlled wine cellars cannot be maintained on mid-market rents. Instead, the likeliest outcome is that institutional investors will step in, acquiring troubled assets at a discount and holding them as luxury properties, even if many units remain empty. This cycle keeps the oversupply of luxury units in place while doing nothing to address the shortage of affordable homes. The financial engineering behind these projects adds to the risk. Many developers relied on interest-only loans with balloon payments, expecting to sell or refinance before the principal came due. With the market for new sales frozen and refinancing costs surging, some owners now face the prospect of repaying loans that exceed the current value of their buildings. Regional banks, which hold a significant share of these construction loans, are exposed to losses as defaults rise. Some banks base their lending on rent projections that were never realistic, and as loans go bad, the risk of broader financial instability grows. The impact will extend beyond developers and lenders. Cities that offered tax abatements to attract luxury projects could see those revenues vanish as buildings enter bankruptcy. Public pension funds with investments in luxury real estate could face losses. Tenants in troubled buildings may see maintenance decline as new owners cut costs to preserve cash flow, leading to deteriorating living conditions even in high-end properties. New construction of any kind will become harder to finance as banks tighten standards in response to mounting losses, further slowing the pace of new housing supply. While some cities are experimenting with interventions, such as tying refinancing assistance to affordable housing requirements, these efforts remain limited in scale and have yet to demonstrate widespread success. The coming wave of defaults will challenge long-held assumptions about the safety and profitability of luxury housing as an investment. For years, luxury apartments were treated as reliable, inflation-resistant assets. Now, as the market shifts, both the risks and the real costs are coming into focus. The next steps will depend on how policymakers and local governments respond to these pressures. Some cities are already looking for ways to break the cycle and encourage more balanced, sustainable housing development, Policy solutions that work. Effective policy solutions for affordable housing share a common principle. They align developer incentives with the public interest, making it profitable and straightforward to build homes that meet real community needs. Minneapolis offers a clear demonstration of this approach. The city eliminated single-family zoning and streamlined the approval process for mid-density projects, which led to a 45% surge in affordable housing starts. By allowing developers to build more units on the same land and get projects approved more quickly, the city shifted the profit equation. Developers no longer faced a choice between slow, uncertain approval for affordable projects and a faster path for luxury homes. Instead, building modest, attainable housing became the path of least resistance. Other cities have found success with inclusionary zoning, which requires a portion of new developments to be set aside as affordable units. Boston's program, for example, mandates that projects over a certain size include affordable housing, but gives developers flexibility in how they meet the requirement. They can build affordable units on-site, pay into a housing fund, or construct them elsewhere. This flexibility keeps overall construction moving while ensuring that affordability is integrated into the city's growth. Since 2020, Boston has added thousands of mixed-income units through this approach, demonstrating that mandates can work when paired with options that fit different project types. Streamlining permitting is another powerful lever. Delays and uncertainty in the approval process drive up soft costs for all projects, but they hit affordable housing especially hard. When Minneapolis reduced the average permitting timeline from 18 months to just 6, developers reported that mid-priced housing became much easier to finance and build. The result was a significant increase in affordable housing starts, achieved without lowering material costs or requiring new subsidies. The same construction crews and materials were used, but the faster approvals made the math work for more projects. Land use reforms have also proven effective. Portland's removal of parking minimums near transit corridors reduced construction costs by about 15%, allowing more affordable projects to move forward. Austin's policies to legalize modest apartment buildings in all neighborhoods, sometimes called missing middle housing, have opened up sites previously reserved for single-family luxury homes. These changes don't require large public spending. They simply remove barriers that made it difficult to build the kinds of housing most people need. Financial incentives, when targeted carefully, can tip the balance in favor of affordability. Some cities offer density bonuses for projects that include affordable units, letting developers add extra floors or units that help offset lower rents. Others provide tax abatements tied to long-term affordability requirements. These incentives work because they make affordable housing a reliable way for developers to earn a return, not just a charitable add-on. Community engagement processes can be structured to support, rather than stall, new housing. Boston, for instance, set clear design standards and time limits for public objections. This approach ensures that neighbors have a voice, but prevents endless delays that add risk and cost to affordable projects. Developers get the predictability they need, while the public still participates in shaping growth. Tax policy can also make a difference. Shifting property taxes from buildings to land values, as seen in Pittsburgh, discourages speculation and rewards productive use of land. Over time, this has supported steady growth in middle-income housing and limited the number of vacant lots held for profit. A crucial lesson from these examples is that housing policy works best when it treats affordable development as a business opportunity, not just a social obligation. Developers respond to incentives and regulations that make affordable projects as attractive as luxury ones. When cities make it easier, faster, and more profitable to build the right kind of housing, the market responds. Short-term rental conversions present a growing challenge. National Association of Realtors surveys show that the share of luxury units converted to short-term rentals has increased in major metros, driven in part by private equity investment. These conversions reduce the supply of long-term rentals and contribute to the ongoing shortage of affordable homes. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition estimates a gap of 7.1 million homes for extremely low-income renters, a shortage that is made worse when existing units are shifted to short-term use. Policies that succeed recognize the realities of the market and shape incentives accordingly. When rules, financing, and zoning align to make affordable housing the best business decision, developers, large and small, choose to build it. These approaches don't just fill a quota, they change the underlying structure of the market, ensuring that more people have access to homes they can afford. As these policy changes take root, the balance of power in the housing market begins to shift. The next challenge is understanding how renters themselves can take advantage of new dynamics. What renters can play a more active role for renters navigating the current market. Practical strategies can make a real difference in both affordability and quality of life. High vacancy rates in luxury buildings, for instance, are not always advertised but can be uncovered with a simple public records request to the local housing department. This data allows renters to identify which properties are struggling to fill units. In buildings with more than a quarter of units sitting empty, landlords are often willing to negotiate, offering concessions like free months of rent, waived amenity fees, or upgrades that don't appear in online listings. Renters who come prepared with this information are in a stronger position to secure lower rents or better terms. Coordinated action among tenants can amplify this leverage. Even small groups of renters in the same building, when organized, can negotiate collectively for better lease terms or reductions in fees. In cities where renter unions have formed, there have been documented cases of successful rent reductions and improved maintenance responses, especially in high-vacancy properties. The key is timing lease renewals together and presenting a united front. Landlords are more likely to make concessions to avoid multiple vacancies at once, particularly in markets where new supply is still coming online. Timing also plays a significant role. Many luxury buildings experience their highest vacancy rates in the winter months, especially in colder climates when fewer people move. Applying for leases or negotiating renewals between November and January can yield better deals, as landlords are more motivated to fill units during slower seasons. Renters can also use local planning department data to see if new buildings are opening nearby. When additional supply is about to enter the market, existing landlords often become more flexible with lease terms to avoid losing tenants to newer competitors. Scrutinizing fees is another area where renters can push back. Amenity charges, sometimes $150 or more per month, are increasingly common in luxury properties, and these are often negotiable, especially if a group of tenants challenges them together. Some buildings have dropped or reduced these fees when faced with organized tenant resistance. Renters should also ask about unadvertised discounts or special programs. Some properties maintain a small number of below-market units to comply with local regulations or offer discounts to certain professions, but these deals are rarely publicized and usually go to those who ask directly. Older buildings can offer significant value. Apartments built 5 to 10 years ago often have similar layouts and features as new construction, but typically rent for less and come with fewer hidden costs. Renters willing to consider these second-generation luxury units can find better deals, particularly as owners of older properties compete with new developments for tenants. Documenting maintenance issues and following up on unresolved repairs can also be a source of leverage. When renters present a detailed list of outstanding problems, especially if the building has failed inspections or received complaints, landlords may offer rent reductions or other concessions to avoid further scrutiny. Keeping records, photos, emails, inspection reports strengthens a renter's negotiating position. Renters should not overlook the importance of reviewing lease terms carefully. Many luxury leases now include automatic rent increases or clauses that limit renewal options. These terms can often be negotiated out, particularly in high-vacancy buildings where landlords are eager to avoid turnover. Starting lease negotiations early, ideally 3 to 4 months before expiration, gives renters more options and time to secure better terms. Political engagement remains a powerful but underused tool. With only about 12% of renters participating in local elections, policies often favor homeowners and developers. Even a modest increase in renter turnout can have a significant impact on the passage of tenant protections, affordable housing incentives, and stricter building codes. Renters who pay attention to local races and support candidates focused on housing reform can help shift priorities at the city level. Technology now makes tenant organizing more accessible. Secure messaging apps and shared online documents allow renters to coordinate efforts, compare lease offers, and track landlord practices without relying on traditional meetings. Legal resources, such as free tenant counseling provided by local nonprofits or bar associations, can help renters understand their rights and negotiate more effectively. Ultimately, The tools for renters to improve their situations are already available. Accessing building-specific data, organizing with neighbors, and getting involved in local politics can collectively change the balance of power. Many landlords are more willing to negotiate than they admit, especially as vacancies rise and competition increases. The current environment offers renters more leverage than at any point in recent memory, but realizing these gains depends on taking action. As these strategies become more common, the question becomes how cities can build on this momentum to create a housing market that works for everyone, not just those at the top. The path forward. Looking ahead, the question is not whether cities will keep building, but whether they can reshape the rules so that new construction actually serves the people who need housing most. The path forward starts with a shift away from rigid, outdated zoning and toward performance-based models that reward developers for delivering what communities lack: family units, long-term affordability, and housing that matches local demand. Performance-based zoning replaces blanket restrictions with clear, measurable outcomes, like a set percentage of affordable units or a minimum number of family-sized apartments, and then lets developers decide how to meet those targets. This approach gives builders the flexibility to innovate while aligning their financial interests with community priorities. Cities that have adopted these models are already seeing results. Minneapolis, for example, eliminated single-family zoning and streamlined the approval process for mid-density projects. The effect was immediate. Affordable housing starts rose by 45% without the need for new subsidies. Developers responded to the new incentives by shifting their focus from luxury condos to projects that met the updated criteria. The lesson is straightforward. When local rules make attainable housing the most profitable choice, the market adapts quickly. Inclusionary zoning is another tool that has shown practical results. Boston's program requires major new developments to include affordable units, but it also offers developers options, such as contributing to a housing fund or building units off-site. This flexibility keeps construction moving while ensuring that affordability is built into the city's growth. Since 2020, Boston has added thousands of mixed-income units through this approach, proving that mandates can work when paired with practical pathways for compliance. Financial incentives and streamlined approvals are critical. Luxury projects have dominated because their higher margins can absorb soft costs, like permitting delays, legal fees, and financing charges, that now account for about 60% of a project's total cost, according to NAB. By comparison, materials make up only about 40%. When cities reduce approval times for projects that deliver affordability or family-sized units, they change the profit equation. Minneapolis cut permitting for mid-density housing from 18 months to just 6, making these projects more attractive than luxury builds weighed down by long delays. The same crews, materials, and sites can be used for different types of housing. It's the regulatory and financial hurdles that determine what gets built. Land use reforms amplify these effects. Removing parking minimums near transit, as Portland did, can cut construction costs by up to 15%, making affordable projects viable where they weren't before. Legalizing low-rise apartments in all neighborhoods, sometimes called missing middle housing, opens up sites that were once reserved for single-family homes. These changes don't require new subsidies. They simply eliminate artificial barriers that have kept attainable housing off the table. The way buildings are appraised also shapes what gets built. Many cities value new developments based on their potential luxury income, not the actual rents collected. This practice incentivizes developers to leave units vacant in hopes of higher future rents. Some cities now require appraisers to use real lease rates, which discourages vacancy and encourages stable occupancy. Early data suggests that this shift leads to higher occupancy rates and steadier returns for property owners. Labor and financing policies can further tip the balance. Training programs that focus on efficient, quality construction for affordable housing, like Boston's Skilled Labor Partnership, help reduce build times and costs without cutting wages. Revolving loan funds at below-market rates, such as Minneapolis's $200 million initiative, provide capital for affordable projects without requiring ongoing taxpayer subsidies. These efforts bridge the gap between public need and private investment. Tax reform plays a supporting role. Shifting property taxes from buildings to land values, as seen in Pittsburgh, discourages speculation and encourages the productive use of urban lots. This policy led to a measurable increase in middle-income construction, ensuring that more sites are put to work for housing instead of sitting vacant awaiting luxury development. Each of these changes recognizes that developers respond to incentives, not ideology. When the most profitable path is to build attainable, family-oriented housing, that's what gets built. The market is not broken. It's following the rules that cities set. If those rules reward affordability and stability, developers will deliver it. Ultimately, the next phase will depend on whether policymakers and city leaders are willing to confront the trade-offs and rewrite the incentives. The performance-based, incentive-driven approach is not a theory. It's a set of tools already working in a handful of cities. The challenge is scaling these reforms to match the scale of the housing crisis. The choices made now will determine whether the cycle of luxury oversupply and unmet need continues, or whether cities finally begin to address the root causes of the housing shortage. Current market dynamics have produced a housing landscape where luxury units dominate, not because of market failure, but because policy and financial incentives make high-end construction the most rational choice for developers. The oversupply of luxury apartments, often sitting vacant, is a direct result of these incentives, while millions of renters remain cost-burdened or unable to find suitable homes. Cities that have implemented targeted reforms, like eliminating single-family zoning or streamlining permitting, have seen measurable results. Minneapolis, for example, increased affordable housing starts by 45% through zoning reform. Research from Seattle and Boston shows that organized tenant advocacy can successfully push for inclusionary zoning and permitting reforms, leading to real improvements in housing access. As more communities adopt these evidence-based policies, the path to a more balanced and responsive housing market becomes clearer. The most effective solutions come from aligning incentives, supporting tenant action, and learning from cities that have already made progress.